Okay, I'm going to have to read this off my phone. Something was dropped today about Darwin, primitive evolution, whether it applied to Caine's bloodline. Darwin's theory, and was it used to cover up Caine's bloodline, to cover up their kind, in our society? Because the main movers and shakers in V2K are slightly retarded in nature and thought, even though they're very fleshy natured, and they kind of don't relate to, like how, because like they're part angel, part human, like from the Caine bloodline. They don't have the same sensibilities as what like your average human that have got compassion and stuff. And as I say, like God showed me something to do with Caine's bloodline having like murder all the way right back. So they're a kind of retarded bloodline, and like from what I know to this day, like I think it's concerning like the Rothschilds and like this funny Jewish hike or contamination, I think, a lot of the worst kind. They're not real Jews, as in like your traditional Orthodox sense, but I'm beginning to start seeing that there's definitely a contamination between all these lines, like and stuff. So like I think they covered this line up with the Darwin theory, to apply it to all of us, where it's a load of rubbish. It's a kind of retarded race that's mixed in with our bloodlines. It's very complicated, but like they do have these traits, especially if they're like inbred, and these people have managed to like navigate sorcery and stuff like that they use in V2K, to like take down the world. But I mean they don't earn it properly, these people, like because they are in that retarded state, they steal things, and that's their forte. I don't know if Satan helps them along the way, but being as he's a kin, but like it's not as black and white as what you see, because as I say, it said before, God loves Lucifer, Satan, and like it's kind of a sized up thing of the sin thing, like the way he looks after us is the way he looks after Satan in a way as well. He has to do his bidding. As I say, I've witnessed God literally like shaking him to the core, like to do his bidding for him, like particularly like to discipline his children, which is like what's happening in V2K now. So that's something that dropped earlier, that was Caine's line, covered by the Darwin theory, like I don't know if you know the Darwin theory, like to say that we've all come from caveman and we're a bit thick, and like actually it's a bit more thicker than Caine's line, I think. But I mean, like in Genesis, it goes on about like like Caine's character was a bit arrogant, in almost like the prideful way that Satan was towards God, thinking he could run the show. But like God's teaching him that like his ways like don't quite work out, but he's kind of humouring him along the way. But God took care of Caine, even though he murdered Abel, his brother. But like a spiritual drop says, Caine offered his bloodline seed, like they're kind of like a bit like Trapdoor, like they've got this character like that, like they're a bit wrathful, like Caine's line, like they're rude and intolerant and selfish and jealous, like I mean it must have been rough, for Caine to, I mean, to be fair on him, like to have like a toxic seed, or to be mixed in a toxic way, like between angel seed and human seed, like that for a start off. I mean, that must have drove him mad, that in itself, in his bloodline. But I mean, like it's like a spiritual thing that God says that he offered his seed to God, and that was why God was offended. you know, like, because it all fell with, like, the sin and stuff. I mean, this information is not available, but, you know, I'm beginning to wonder if there's, like Jews or something somewhere have, like, hidden, you know, like, this information from the start. Because, like, it goes on about, like, Eve ate the apple, you know, the fruit. You know, a lot of interpretations say that it was, like, an apple, you know, like what we get in the mainstream media, but actually biblically it says fruit. So, you know, that could be sexual relations and stuff like that. So, you know, like this Caine theory, you know, like that he was of Satan's seed. I mean, that's a whole thing in itself, you know, like Satan's seed, how, you know, like they got together, him and Eve. But, you know, this will come out in time, I think. But that's it anyway. That's all for now.